So 6 months ago, I made a video showcasing a bunch of prototypes I made in the 2 years prior, but since then, I've made so many more. The code and design concepts that I created in these tests have culminated in the creation of 2 new games that I'm so incredibly happy with, and I'll be releasing them next year in 2024. So tag along in this journey to see how I made these massive self-published projects as a full-time developer while sustaining myself with smaller games that I use to build up the code of the bigger ones. The first prototype that directly contributes to those 2 big games is called Soulstalker, and it's my roguelike that is actually out right now in early access. For this game, I made tons of systems, like an attack system, movement system, enemy system, and just so much more. And all of these, I wrote them in such a way that allowed me to carry them forwards to future games, even if they were incredibly different. And the most important system of them all, I feel, is the animation system. Since before this, all of my games had characters that were basically just a single frame, with additional frames for special poses like attacking, being angry, or something like that. How it works for Soulstalker is that I have a class that has 2 parameters. The first one is a list of sprites, that's basically just the frames for the animations, and then the second parameter is just the duration of each frame in that list of frames. So where before my characters used to look like this, they now look a bit more like this. And all of this is possible thanks to Tim, who is just such a good character artist and animator. Also, the attack system that I made in Soulstalker was hugely important as well, since it was also carried forwards to other games, and I'll cover that in this section. This is Synth Beasts, and in short, it's a cross between Zelda and Pokemon. You explore a post-apocalyptic lab island after escaping from the scientist that created you, and you explore the land and recruit other monsters both to do combat and use their abilities to open up new paths, kind of like the items in Zelda games. The attack system in this game started off as a copy-paste of Soulstalker's, but it evolved to meet the needs of the game and the genre. So for example, in Soulstalker, attacks automatically aim towards the nearest enemy, but in Synth Beasts, I made it such that you can control where you attack. I also evolved the system by adding this really neat stamina bar that forces players to be more careful with their attacks. And since the character gets dazed when stamina reaches 0, it also adds this forced downtime that gives the combat more push and pull. Another thing that was a huge leap with this game was that it was the first time that I had pixel art characters in a game of mine since around 3 years ago. Last time I tried it, I made my own character art and they looked a bit like this, so the sprites are definitely way better now than then, and they were done by Andro Art and Monsterham. And I mentioned with Soulstalker that I brought forwards its animation system to other games, and this is actually one of them. There's so many more iterative improvements and structural changes that went into making Synth Beasts, but the last one I want to cover for this video is how I changed the movement system by adding a dash, which consumes stamina, so it allows the combat to have more tension, and also the fact that the controls are affected by the camera direction. In my other games, the control system was really basic. When you pressed left, you went left. When you pressed up, you went up. Right, when you went right, and you kind of get the point. I don't have to do the left one. But for Synth Beasts, I adapted the system to take the camera angle into account. So now I can make these cool sections with dynamic camera angles like this cave, and best of all, I can now just use this code for all of my future projects. With very minimal tinkering, I might also be able to make some sort of third-person camera, but that has tons of design implications, so I'm not going to touch that for now. I really like Synth Beasts. I feel like it has so much potential if adequately fleshed out, and so to build on top of the combat and make it far more strategic, I decided to make a small game as a jumping off point related to Synth Beasts, and I actually released this one on Steam. But before I get to that one, around this time was when the whole Unity thing with the install fee happened, so I was trying out different engines, and one of those was Godot, so I made a prototype with it. This game started out as something super simple to get myself accustomed to Godot, so I tried to copy all of the movement mechanics of my first commercial game, Lootbox Life. And if you pay attention to the actions you can make in that game and compare it to the Godot game, I think you'll notice tons of similarities, and that's because I feel like doing something you're familiar with in a new engine is a great way to learn it. So it started off as something super simple with geometric graphics, and I kept on adding the mechanics until I had them all. But then I ran into a really serious issue. So I was using Godot 4, and for some reason I could not figure out for the life of me why I couldn't get the art to conform to the pixel grid. And by the way, the art here was also made by Monsterham. But yeah, the art was kind of distorted and some pixels displayed incorrectly, giving it this warped feel if you look closely or were playing on a big screen. I thought I was going crazy, but later I found out that this was just the engine, and other people had run into the same issue. So that soured me a bit with the experience, and I know I could have just used Godot 3, but after putting the time into this iteration of the prototype, I decided to just let it go, and maybe try again later once the engine is more developed. But all of this was not lost because I then transposed all of the code to a new engine. So to salvage the effort and the art, I decided to port everything to Unity to be able to possibly keep the code for any potential future projects. So I did exactly that, and with all of the art, it really started to feel, quite nice. And the idea was to make a sort of speedrunning platformer, and I guess I have all of this set up now, so if I ever get the urge to do that, or to reuse code for another sort of 2D game, I can now do that. I think the best thing you can do as an indie developer is write code in such a way that you can then copy it over to future projects so you don't have to start from scratch every single time. It also gives you a bonus to how fast you can develop games, which in my opinion is incredibly important, especially if you're self-publishing, since you have to keep on sustaining yourself and your team. So if you ever see me make a 2D game in the future, you can probably safely assume that the code was based on this prototype. So we went on a little platformer detour, but now we're back to the type of game that I'm more familiar with, which is top-down games with 2D sprites and 3D world graphics. Earlier I explained how I felt that SynthBeast has tons of potential if adequately fleshed out, and how I made another small game to explore more deep combat, and that's exactly what Wanted Shadows, this prototype, was. It actually released on Steam about a month ago from this video going live, and basically it takes the roguelike framework that I built out with Soulstalker, and it combines it with the stamina management based action combat of SynthBeasts, and it resulted in a game that people really enjoyed. The main thing that this game explored that could really be applied to SynthBeasts is the upgrade system. It follows a kind of upgrade system that's relatively common in roguelikes, but what's really great is that they all work super synergistically with each other, so you can create stupidly overpowered combos. And since Wanted Shadows uses the same code base as SynthBeasts, what I plan to do now is take the code and apply it to SynthBeasts, but obviously SynthBeasts is not a roguelike, right? So it has to work differently. And so the way that it will work is that I will take the upgrade system that I created in Wanted Shadows and take that code and apply it to a Hollow Knight styled badge system in SynthBeasts. So the synergistic upgrades that existed in Wanted Shadows will exist in SynthBeast as a kind of synergistic badge system. So SynthBeast will have the synergistic aspect of roguelikes with the progression of a Metroidvania, which I feel is a really cool way of mashing together different games that you make as a game developer. And so tying this back, often I get asked how I manage to run an indie game studio while self-publishing, and I think that this ability to write reusable code and reuse concepts in different settings while limiting scope is the absolute key. You don't need to make the biggest game ever as your first game, but by making multiple small ones, you can build up your toolset and make a huge game without that much risk once you've been at it for a while. And speaking of big games, now we're at the part where I'm going to talk about my next big one. So I absolutely love RPGs, and I think that if you've been following me from my previous game, you probably feel the same. And so this is the next RPG that I'm going to be working on. This game reuses the animation system from Soulstalker, but expands on it massively, since now each character can have a super detailed set of animations, including directional walks and special cutscene animations like the one here, where the main character is pointing. The main development with this game though, is that I made a custom cutscene and interaction system that works incredibly well. You can see here how a cutscene can be laid out, and it works basically for anything that you can think of. And it worked so well that I actually backported this system to Soulstalker, my early access game. So I'm doing an update for that game where there's a hub world with NPCs and interactables, and I didn't need to write any new code for this part because I just yoinked it from my RPG, just like that. And apart from that, for this game, we're making the characters have a far bigger set of animations, thanks to Monster Ham. That's all I'm going to reveal about this game now because I'm not ready to properly announce it yet. But there's another game that this one's code contributed to, and it's a game concept I'm also incredibly passionate about. So this is it. It's a detective game, and the genre of it is a whodunit, kind of like Agatha Christie's books, or if you want a more recent example, it would be like the Knives Out movies. And the interaction system of this game is, again, the same as the RPGs, so it really didn't take much effort to set up at all. And with this one, I really wanted to focus on making supremely moody locations, and so the art is mega important. Brian is the artist who usually does the promotional art for my games, but for this one, he's doing the characters, so I'm super excited to show you more of the game closer to the release, which I think will actually be around Halloween of next year. I'm also super excited to show the combat system for this one, but I'll save that for when we do a proper Steam page launch and everything. I hope this video has shown you how valuable it is to be able to prototype fast and be able to move systems between projects, because I really think that if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be able to make self-published games as my job full-time. If you want to learn more about the exact method that I use, I made a video about exactly that, which you can find on screen right now. And if any of these games are interesting to you, I've put links in the description to the ones that are out right now and have bundle discounts, so I would super appreciate it if you check that out. Also, Soulstalker's hub update is out right now on the Steam beta branch, so I'll put that link as the first one in the description. It's such a huge update, and if the game wasn't early access, it basically could have been a sequel. Other than that, make sure to subscribe to catch next week's video, and I hope this one was useful. Bye.